I'm starting this video with a slightly different perspective so that you can see, if you hadn't noticed before, my office, given my role at the university as being university chaplain. I have to assume a certain posture, position, stance toward the various religions that are here at the university. Many of them are represented here, many are not, but so this set of flags up behind me is not only meant to be a conversation starter, as it does with a lot of folks who come into my office, but also meant to be a little bit of a welcome to people who come to my office who may be really suspicious of coming to talk to the chaplain because they're going to assume that he has got an agenda. And so, to have these as part of my my decoration, if you will, my decoration, is a statement, I hope, of hospitality. So you've seen Prothero now and heard him, and I'm not. The assignment has to do, probably read below, has to do with how we as Episcopalians deal with being in a multi-religious world. And I'll let you read it down there below. I just want to preface it a little bit by quoting something that I heard, or referring to something that I heard on an interview with Brian McLaren, who recently wrote a book about Jesus, Buddha, or why did Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and Moses cross the road, or something like that, that. But there's a little bit of that interfaith stuff in that book by this prominent evangelical of a progressive stripe, this book. But he points out that Abraham, neither Abraham nor Moses, lived in a monoculture, a religious monoculture. And Jesus didn't live in a religious monoculture. Certainly he lived in Palestine, he lived surrounded by Jews, but there were Samaritans, and there were Greeks, and there were Romans. And so it wasn't a religious monoculture. Certainly Paul did not live or work in a religious monoculture. And we, for a long time, sort of felt that we did. And in the last 25, 30 years, that has changed, and we are not in a monoculture at all. We are much more in a culture that looks like maybe Abraham's or Moses's, both in Egypt and as they were moving into and towards the Promised Land, and Jesus' time and Paul's time. Certainly, we have part of our history as being sort of monocultural, but that has changed. So we're going to encounter people all the time of different faith stances. And how do we address those? Titus Pressler, who is, I forget where he is now, he's been a lot of different things. It seemed like he's been a dean at a seminary now sometime. I met him a long time ago. Wrote one of the volumes on the church's teaching series, Horizons of Mission, and which is a very good book. I used it with my board when I was the executive director of Berkeley Canterbury Foundation, as we were considering what our mission was. It wasn't so much questions of how do we relate to other religious traditions, but it's a very good book just in terms of thinking about what is the mission of the church. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. But he points out, and this is on page 125 of the book, he says, every Christian's stance toward other religions is likely the fruit of unique experiences and reflections, say dreams, okay? But three general positions can be identified: exclusivism, inclusivism, and pluralism. And I'll just define these three for you as he defines them. An exclusivist believes salvation, often conceptualized as eternal community with God, is available only through an explicitly acknowledged relationship with Christ. The exclusivist views other religions as having little or nothing to offer, and their devotees as mistaken or deceived. Christianity is affirmed as unique, definitive, absolute, normative, and superior in relation to other religions. An inclusivist affirms both the spiritual richness of other faiths and the centrality of Christ, believing that Christ is the source of the truth and communion available in other religions, and that they find their true fulfillment in Christ. The most illustrative phrase coming from this position has been, quote, the unknown Christ of Hinduism, unquote, which expressed Raimundo Panikar's view that, quote, recognizing the presence of God in other religions is equivalent to proclaiming the presence of Christ in them, for in him all things subsist. Pluralism, the third position, is the principal challenge many Christians wrestle with today. A pluralist believes that other religions have their own autonomous validity, independent of Christ, that God works through them as fully as God works through Christianity. We Christians have as much to learn from them as they do from us. A pluralist is likely to argue that faith should be God-centered or theocentric, rather than Christ-centered or Christocentric. Some pluralists see all religions as different ways of experiencing the same reality, or as in different views of one mountain, or they look for shared themes among religions. I'm going to stop there. Prothero and Stephen Colbert talk about different paths up the mountains, and Prothero says, no, there are different paths up different mountains. We often hear that, different paths up the same mountain. We talk about the elephant and how do you see the elephant, the blind folks trying to figure out the elephant. I heard somebody once say that it's not that humans take different paths up the mountain to find God, but that God may take different paths down the mountain to find humans. That would be another pluralist way of seeing that God is trying to reach out to us. So you've looked at what your Patronuses have to say about Jesus Christ and how Jesus Christ affects salvation. And now you've got to sort of take that, and I don't want to say put your Patronus in conversation with other religions, that's not it. But the question is, if we believe that Jesus is the Christ, and we have certain sets of assumptions related to that, how do we work in a multi-religious world? And so the assignment, as it's outlined down below, gives you an opportunity to think about that and compress it into a newsletter article for your parish newsletter. You know how long those are going to be. They're not very long. And so this isn't an essay, a big essay. It's a short, pithy piece that your congregants might find some help with.